I had a purpose before everybody had an opinion.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out.
You want Philly?
Chase Utley, you are the man.
You come out backyard and you try to start something, you always get your butt kicked.
The prayers have been answered.
How about those Eagles, baby?
And Rio Muto can run for days.
Can you feel what's about to happen on this field, man?
A perfect game. Roy Halladay has thrown the second perfect game in Philadelphia Phillies history.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Philly Talk. This episode likely is going to be a shorter one, and you're likely going to see me talking really fast, and that is simply because I am in the middle of finals week, so I can't spend too much time not only talking on this episode, but editing the episode and everything, so there's not going to be really a sort of segmented, this isn't going to be like a segmented episode with the good, the bad, and you're likely going to hear me like miss out on some things. I'm going to miss bringing up certain things, and that is just simply because, I don't have the time today, hopefully as the school year wraps up though, you'll see me, be able to spend more time in detail talking about the Phillies as well as other topics for the channel as well, because I got a lot planned, especially for year-end stuff. But going towards the focus of this episode, of course, it is football. We are talking about the Eagles, and getting it straight out the way. Not a good loss to the Niners. A very disappointing one. Basically blown out at home. Not what you want to see. Niners just got the best of us, and it's really on the whole team. It's on the defense for not playing as well. It's on Sean Desai for, not play calling as well, because as he said it himself, which you love to see him holding himself accountable, as he said it himself, the first half, the Niners didn't score anything, like they held them pretty much in check with a bunch of not the first half, the first quarter, they pretty much held them, it was a bunch of three and outs, and then next thing you know, here they come, and they just start blowing us out the water, and they couldn't make the adjustments. The offense couldn't make the adjustments, Comes down to the whole team just failing to really do anything, Hurts had 298 yards and a touchdown on the day. AJ, had himself a good game, 114 yards on 8 catches, but it doesn't really mean much when you don't get the win, Devontae Smith, 96 yards and a touchdown. Doesn't mean much when you don't get the win, The real disappointing part was the rushing. DeAndre Swift only gets 6 carries. Ken Gainwell only gets 2. They didn't even try getting the run game going, and I know a lot of people will be like, it's because they were behind, but like even in the early goings, they didn't get it going. And you hear Brian Johnson talking about like trying to get in the groove of things and trying to see what's the best approach, and it's like, we are in week 13. How do you still not realize that giving the ball to DeAndre Swift, isn't the key to a lot of the ways this offense works? Like, look at so many of the games, especially the games where we've had like high scoring affairs, and the common thing is that, DeAndre Swift is getting carries to open up the passing lane, like that's something that just should be obvious, like you want to be this diverse offense so that you can open up the passing lanes for guys like AJ and Devontae. Now they did have a pretty good game here, but how much of that came in garbage time, so not too happy with the way they played, not too happy with Brian Johnson's play calling in a lot of situations. Was definitely not too happy with Sirianni choosing to punt. I believe it was in the third quarter, I think it was, on like a 4th and 2. Didn't really like that decision, but I mean, what can you do, This was a really important game in terms of the number 1 seeding, especially, so it's a bit disappointing to see them lose this game, because now it gives San Francisco the opportunity to take that 1 seed from us. And obviously, the whole thing about the fans whining and complaining, and the player. Well, not all the players, because you have people like Fred Warner, like Nick Bosa, who approach it the right way, in the sense of like last year was last year. It's up to them to, it's a new game this year and all that, and like Fred Warner was saying, at the end of the day, both teams went home not happy, obviously with them losing in the championship game and us losing the Super Bowl, but it's a whole new year and all that, so it's just, it was a game that you wanted to, really have more fight in, to like prove a lot of things, but they just didn't, like the Niners clearly came with more to play, with more to prove, but obviously this win doesn't disprove last year's loss, like I find it baffling that people always try and rewrite history like that, it's like the Eagles beating the Chiefs in week 11 doesn't mean that the Super Bowl was a fluke, so it's like I don't get why a week 13 win would disprove the championship game over anything, especially when there's so much turnover from last year for both teams, like this Niners team is very different than last year's, this Eagles team is different than last year's, so it makes no sense to be like, oh, see, this Niner team would have won. Team is completely different. This Niner team took Javon Hargrave from the Eagles and added it to their already stacked defensive line. The Eagles don't have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, patrolling in the back end. Although, was he injured during the game? Oh, not in the championship game. Who else is missing from our linebackers? We're out here having to sign, Shaq Leonard, for, the simple fact that our linebackers are cooked, Nakobe Dean's injured. I think Zach Cunningham was injured too. And we're stuck starting Nicholas Morrow, who gave up all the yardage in this game, basically. And before anyone tries to say that I'm using injuries as excuse, no, I'm just telling you, what's different about this team compared to last year's. As far as injuries come, that's on, that's on the team, and that's on essentially the general manager, I said the same thing last year when Brock Purdy went down in that championship game. One, obviously, like I said then, it was Shanahan's fault for putting a tight end on Hassan Reddick after the year he was having. No coach in the league makes that decision knowing you got a prime edge rusher there. Perfect example, look at this game. Lane Johnson was constantly matching up with Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa won a lot of different times, but so did Lane Johnson. You put your best blockers on the best defender. You don't be putting a tight end and a backup tight end at that, on a top player like that. But at the same time, first off, you're not going to get any sympathy from Eagles fans because we went on to win a Super Bowl with a backup QB, with a bunch of players who stepped up that during that season. So I have the same mindset here for the Eagles, who want to talk about injuries, who want to talk about Dallas Goedert being out, Zach Cunningham being out, Nakobe Dean being out. Man, I'm trying to think of some other players who were out of this game as well. But, that's on us as a team, and that's on, like I said, the general manager to be able to construct a deep roster, What was so great about that Eagles Super Bowl winning team was how deep they were, The fact that, and not even just how deep they were, but how much certain players stepped up in their positions when others went down, like Jason Peters went down for the season, Darren Sproles went down, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of who. Obviously Wentz went down, and look at the players who stepped up. Nick Foles, Corey Clement. Even, like that's the crazy part to me is we already had the Garrett Blunt and Jay Ajayi, and yet Corey Clement was still a very key piece at times in the offense, and very much filling in that Darren Sproles role at times. On the defensive side, how many times do we see so many of our different cornerbacks step up? Because this was pre us having, Darius Slay and James Bradbury. We were out here with, trying to think, I think it was Avonte Maddox, Patrick Robinson. There's another one I'm forgetting. I think was LeBlanc on that team. LeBlanc might have been on that team. I think Sidney Jones was drafted a year or two after. But, you get the gist of it. Like, those were our cornerbacks. Our safeties at the time were Ronnie McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins, you know. But like anytime people were getting injuries, like you saw different people step up to the plate to the point where our motto was next man up, you know. And so it's a similar thing here with this Niners game where you can use injury excuses all you want, but when it comes to me, I will never go to injuries as an excuse. I will never go to the refs as an excuse, you know, because that's the way the league is at this point. The refs, you know, they call things for both sides. Sometimes it's more one-sided, you know, but that's just the way it is. We literally, it's out of our control, you know, so I don't even look to blame it anymore, especially because it just comes as a cheap cop-out a lot of times. And especially because, like, you could literally go and break down any game, you know, play by play and find things that were wrong. You know, a penalty that was missed, a play that went wrong here, you know. So, like I'm saying, injuries and refs, I'm never going to blame. So for this, you know, you can talk about all the injuries you want, but it's on the Eagles for not, you know, having that stuff, you know, prepared and ready, you know, with a deep enough roster. Like, you know, the whole issue of Dallas Goedert being such a key piece to this offense at the tight end spot, you know, it's like, you need to have depth. Well, again, going back to that Eagles Super Bowl team, what was so great, again, was the amount of depth they had. Look at the tight end position. Brent Selleck, Zach Ertz, and Trey Burton. All three key tight ends who, you know, played pivotal roles during that entire season, you know. Looking at the Eagles team, it's Dallas Goedert and who else? There's Grant Calcaterra. We traded for Albert O. There's, Jack Stoll, I think it is, you know. That, you know, it's no offense to those guys, but when you see them out on their field, they're obviously not performing that well. And, you know, in our eyes, it's like, where's the depth, you know? I get it, especially with contracts and budget and salary cap and all that, you know. I'm not saying they have, like, 3 superstar tight ends. Like, the only reason the Eagles were probably really well able to have Selleck, Ertz, and Burton was because, you know, Burton was on a cheaper contract. I don't think Ertz was on that high of a contract at that point. He might have been, but maybe not super high, you know, so that's why. And plus, especially when you look at the receiver position, they weren't paying guys like A.J. Brown, you know, so they obviously had a lot more money to work with, but it's like, you know, you got to invest in just the depth, you know, because you never know what injuries are going to happen. It's like the same thing with if Jalen Hurts went down, which he went out for, you know, a couple of minutes in that game. Mariota's our backup, and from what we saw in preseason, I wouldn't trust him at all. You know, like, that's something that we really should look into investing better in, is someone who could properly run this offense better, you know. I think letting Minshew go was obviously kind of a mistake, as we see what he's doing out there in Indianapolis, helping them out, you know. But, you know, there's nothing really much more to say about this game. Just disappointed with it, but, you know, you got to move on. You're not going to win them all. And, I mean, the fact that we're going through this stretch of teams, you know, with only one loss, really, you know, that was supposed to be like a gauntlet, and we only have one loss, you'll take it, man. Now, it's just up to finishing the season strong. You got to beat Dallas, you know, to not lose any momentum. You got a tough game against Seattle. A lot of people want to write off Seattle, but the thing is, the Philly has always struggled against Seattle for whatever reason. You know, I don't know what it is against, especially when we're at Seattle. I don't know what it is, but it's always such a difficult thing for us to beat the Seahawks. So, got to watch out for that. And then, you know, you just cannot take your foot off the gas with these last 2 games against the Giants and the Cardinals game. I believe this Cardinals game is very pivotal for us to win if we're still ahead of Dallas, because I think since Dallas lost to them, we have the tiebreaker in that situation. I honestly forget how all this stuff works when it comes to, you know, conference record, divisional record, and all that, and how the seeding plays out. But as it stands, the Eagles are still number 1 seed. Just want to see a bunch of more change. I know it seems crazy, you know, the standard at times I hold this team, especially because, like, it's 10-2, or they're 10-2, and you never seem happy about them. But, like, you can't blame me when I'm watching, you know, Brian Johnson out here have some ridiculously play calling, or ridiculously bad play calling, I mean, and then Sean Desai flipping a coin on when he and the defense want to do well or not, you know. Like, it's crazy that they did so well against the Chiefs, and now here's back-to-back games where they've struggled against, the Bills and the Niners. Not really what you want to see, But that's just kind of the standard I hold my team to, especially after all these years of, pain they've put me through. Yes, I know other teams have had it worse, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it gets so annoying debating sports at times because it's like you try and talk about something and here come these other people that, want to make it all about them in a sense. Like, we're talking Philly over here. I'm trying to talk to my Philly fan base. I don't care about how the Lions franchise has suffered more. I'm just talking about through my personal experiences as a Philly fan. It's been quite a lot of pain, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh, it's always funny that non-Philly fans will try and bring up stuff like I saw someone trying to justify that the Chip Kelly era wasn't that bad." That's how you know they're not a Philly fan, that they weren't here during that time, because they weren't here to watch Chip Kelly dismantle that team and, almost set us up for failure in the years to come. But, thanks to Howie Roseman coming back, which is crazy to think because there was a time where we all wanted Howie Roseman gone, and a couple of risks like, picking Doug Peterson as our head coach, picking certain players and all that, But yeah, it's all I just wanted to bring that up because that was just a funny thing that someone really thought that the Chip Kelly era wasn't that bad. I like how I said this was going to be a shorter video, and we're already here at the 16-minute mark. So real quickly, I'll wrap this up with one final thing. As you see with the thumbnail, there is no Eagles player, and that's because what Eagles player deserves to be on the thumbnail after yesterday's game, But you see Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, and Myles Garrett. The reason I have those three as the thumbnail is because we're getting towards the end of the season. MVP talks are heating up, and Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, and Dak Prescott are the leaders for the MVP odds. What are we doing as a league where those guys are leading when we have position players going absolutely crazy? I mean, just looking at some of their stats, it's insane, Like right now, Tyreek Hill is averaging like 120 something yards per game. I think it is. I think it's something like. Hold on, I'm trying to look here. Where is it? Where's this stat at? Why am I not seeing it? Well, basically, on the season. Oh, here it is. Receiving on the season. Yeah, 123.4 yards is what he's averaging a game. On the season, Tyreek right now with what? Like, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 5 more games to go? Yeah, 5 more games to go. He has 1,481 yards. If he keeps up this pace, he's likely getting 2K, He has 12 touchdowns on the season. He also has, trying to see, let's see. Looking at the leading stats, let's see. He had there was a crazy stat I saw. I think it's like all-purpose yards, 1,496. Just crazy stuff, He's going absolutely insane. Then you look over to the Niners, and it's absolutely baffling. And I'm not trying to disrespect the guy because, I mean, what a story to be the last pick in the draft and to, do this well with his team that he's been, the way he's been playing. It's no disrespect to Brock Purdy, but 3,185 yards, 23 touchdowns in 6 seasons with 5 weeks to go. We're looking at that as the leader of the MVP. Meanwhile, Christian McCaffrey is out here with 1,032 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns, and that's to add almost 430 yards receiving with another 5 touchdowns. And looking at like the league leading stats, what did I see? He's leading in rushing. I think he's leading in touches at like 261 total touches. He's absolutely the key piece on that offense. Like he is the guy that matters the most. And I get it. There's been times where like he missed a game and they still win. But like he just adds another level to that offense. It's his rushing. It's his dual threat ability of being able to rush and receive that opens the lane for other guys like Deebo Samuel, like George Kittle, like Brandon Ayuk. It's the fact that so many times when you're playing the Niners, your eyes are on him most of the time because you're worried about what he's going to do. And then the last one, Myles Garrett, it might come as a surprise to see a defensive player, here, but I mean, come on, just look at the guy, like he has 4 forced fumbles on the day, or on the year as it stands with 5 more games to go. He's recovered one of those fumbles. He has 13 sacks. He has 32 combined tackles. 24 of those are solo. He has 12 tackles for loss, and he's hit the QB 23 times in this season. With 5 more games to go, he could easily get to that 20 sack mark, especially when you're looking at the last couple of games, the Jaguars, the Bears, the Texans, the Jets, and the Bengals, he could easily get to that 20 mark, playing against especially those last 3 out of 4 teams, with Jacksonville likely not having Trevor Lawrence for at least maybe the next game. That's another one where he could easily take advantage, And it's like, a lot of people would be like, well, why are you saying Myles Garrett out of everyone? Deshaun Watson, for the most part this year, was pretty bad. PJ Walker, in the games that he had to play, was pretty bad, for the most part. I mean, he had 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions. And you have DTR, who only is, I know he's only started about 3 games, but, he has a 1 touchdown to 4 interception ratio. You have Joe Flacco, who they're coming in with, at this point to play. It's definitely not the quarterback that's carrying that team to victory, Now, they obviously lost pretty badly to the Rams and the Broncos the past 2 games. But it's like, a lot of times, he is, leading that defense and helping, the Browns win the game. Now, I'm not saying I think, Myles Garrett should win MVP. I just think he should be in consideration for the season he's having. He obviously had a stronger case before these past 2 games, But again, Tyreek Hill, a guy that is, again, like CMC, he's literally the bread and butter, I would say, of that Dolphins offense for the most part. Especially because, there isn't a receiver close to him. Jalen Waddle is, I want to say, almost 700 yards behind Tyreek Hill, All the other receivers on this team are nowhere even close, Like I said, Tyreek is at 1,481 yards. Jalen Waddle is at 743. The next leading receiver is Braxton Berrios at 194. Tyreek Hill is literally the engine of that Miami offense. They're the number 1 seed. How do you not even consider this guy to be one of the front runners, And it's been such a thing for the past couple of years where it's like Cooper Kupp had the Triple Crown and didn't win it. Derrick Henry got 2K yards and didn't win it, McCaffrey was, basically the heartbeat of that Panthers team for all those times that they were bad, and it was just like, how are more of these position players not being considered? Why are we choosing instead to value the quarterback so much? And I get it. The quarterback is the most important position. You can't win without a good quarterback, except all the times that teams have won without a great quarterback. Think of all the teams that have had great quarterbacks and have lost, especially a lot of times to their mistakes. The Bills are a prime example where they have a really great quarterback and they surround him with great talent, and yet sometimes for whatever reason they just can't get over the hump, and people then start turning the argument to being like, oh, it's because he doesn't have this, he doesn't have that. The Super Bowl that the Chiefs lost to the Bucks, all the players were injured, they didn't have an offensive line. It's starting to sound like there isn't exactly one position that is more valuable over the other in football. A quarterback needs a good offensive line to perform good. He needs time in the pocket to, do the pass. Oh, but then, his receivers. He needs receivers who can catch. He needs receivers who can create separation, who could get downfield. He needs a running back for this and this. He's not on defense, he needs a defense that can do this and this. It sounds like a quarterback needs a lot more to be good than some of these other positions, and that goes for every position is what the point I'm trying to make. A running back sometimes can only be as good as his offensive line. Sometimes an offensive line is so good it can make any running back look great. For example, the Eagles offensive line, look at how many times they made running backs look great. Boston Scott always goes off against the Giants, and it's literally because of that Eagles offensive line. Receivers can only be as great if they have a quarterback getting them the ball. But then at the same time, look at guys like Mike Evans, like DeAndre Hopkins, a guy like Andre Johnson, who have these great seasons with mid to trash quarterbacks at their quarterback position, and yet they still find a way to do great, other than having, Tom Brady there for those couple years and, Jameis Winston when he wasn't throwing a ton of interceptions. Mike Evans has, gotten 1,000 yards each year he's been in the NFL with, other than like those last couple years of Brady, not really great quarterback. He doesn't have an Allen or Mahomes to, help him out in a sense, so it's like, look at a guy like that even, it's like, this whole MVP thing is just got my mind blown that like we're looking at a season where the quarterbacks have not been playing well. They have not been doing super great. And yet we're still just like, we got to give it to a quarterback by default. We aren't willing to look past it and push past bias and the whole thing of tradition in a sense and be like, maybe a non-quarterback deserves it this year. Like the last one to do it was Adrian Peterson, and he's likely going to be the last one because the voters, the people in charge, it's like they're never going to look past it, They're not going to pull what they did with the Heisman and be like, well, the quarterbacks are pretty bad, so let's give it to the position player who had a really great season like Devontae Smith. No, they're just going to settle on, well, what quarterback stats is at least the most decent on the season, and let's just go with that, And and I know a lot of people are going to be like, you're only hating on Purdy and Dak because you're an Eagles fan. No, because I threw Jalen's name in there. You could ask my dad, this entire time that we've been watching Eagles games, I would have not been okay with giving Jalen the MVP, especially with the way he's played in some of these games, and especially with the way offensive coordinating has held him back at times, and the offense from being really well, but also some of the mistakes he's made, like I look towards that Jets game where he had 3 interceptions, and it's just like, I wouldn't have even given him that, like, the MVP is this prestigious award, and the past couple of years we've not been doing a good job of really stepping back and being like, who is really, or not even like, the thing is that we just don't have a clear-cut criteria, Is it the player that matters most to the team? Is it the player who had the best season? Is it, I've covered this before on a different channel. Like long ago, I talked about how, there's always different criteria. Who has the best story coming into it? Well, then another year it's who has the best stats. And another year it's, well, who's the most valuable to their team, Like that's always like, it's like a revolving door, just in and out. Different narratives come through, different criteria come through, and we never have a set one, and it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to watch a lot of these great seasons just get passed over due to quarterback bias, And at this point, it's like, just do the college football system, Like, you can have this main award, but like at this point, just start awarding by position, Like, who was the best quarterback on the year? Who was the best running back? Who was the best receiver? Who was the best offensive lineman, defensive lineman, linebacker, defensive back, And I've even said in that video long ago, you could even incentivize it, in a sense of like, it comes out to like a ranking system, and so it's like, a lot of these receivers will or a lot of these players will have the incentive to do really well if it means like, you know, they get a bonus from it. If you finish top 5 in the voting, if you finish top 3 in the voting, if you end as number 1, if you just make the top 10, you know, it'll incentivize it and make for more compelling play, you know. Not that football isn't still compelling, but like it adds a boost to these players, you know, and it would actually make them feel like what they're doing is worth something in a sense, you know, because it's like I said, man, it sucks that a lot of these position players like Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown and Myles Garrett, I think I'm trying to think of like some other just great players who have been really carrying their teams. I mean, Justin Jefferson the past couple of years, you know, being the heart and soul of that Vikings offense for the most part. Just like, it just sucks that they don't get recognition, you know. It just truly sucks. And this has turned into a whole rant, man. This has ended the video at 30 minutes basically, when I was talking about it's going to be short and, you know, to the point. Oh man, but that's just all I have to say. Hoping for an Eagles win this upcoming time. Wish me the best of luck on my finals week, man. I got so much to write. And, you know, here's to hoping that someday we see change for the MVP award. You know, the MVP award seriously needs change. But you know what doesn't need change? The brotherly shove.